So it's obvious that we are gathered here today with a shared belief in some universal values. And we see that populist divisive ideologies, as well as hegemonic and exclusivist theologies, are completely incoherent with these values, such as human dignity, justice, diversity, inclusivity, solidarity, empathy, service. We actually see that these populist ideologies, as well as hegemonic theologies, are centered on anti-values of unequal human dignity, of refusal of diversity, of injustice, indifference to others, exclusivism, lack of solidarity or empathy. Yet, in their eyes, they do not see that. In their eyes, they see that they are jealous believers or nationalists, that their hatred of the other is actually a love for their country or their religion, as Sarah Ahmed exemplifies in The Cultural Politics of Emotion in the chapter about hatred. So what we see is that they are effecting a form of denaturation or distortion of the same values that we speak about, or that they are doing a shrinking of them, because they see themselves as respecting human dignity, or of having solidarity, or of having empathy. But yet they see them, or they live those values only for their closed or own group. We are more shocked also to see that sometimes people are believers and hold these values, and there are a lot of them, or anti-values. So we are shocked, for example, when Christians who live in the religion, and they say the religion is a religion of love, but they end up hating those who are different from them. Or Muslims that say the religion is a religion of mercy, and that have no mercy, or refuse to say God have mercy on a soul of a person that is non-Muslim and just passed away. For us, they are completely incoherent with the message of Christ or Muhammad, but for them, they are coherent because they shrunk the body to whom the values applies. The body in the sense of the group. The body here is not humanity anymore, but their own group. So before thinking together about what theologies are needed to immunize against populist polarization or populist beliefs, let us think together about what leads people to hold such positions, be they political or religious. I will thus start with some reflection from social psychology and also personal observations from my work in dialogue and intercultural and interreligious issues, and then articulate them with theology. So my first part will be social psychology and personal observations, and the second will be more on theology. According to social psychology, we have human needs, and among those needs, I select a few, of course. Among those needs are a need for singularity, for uniqueness. Each one of us needs to feel unique, to feel that we have our special mark on the world and we're different than others. But we also have a need to belong to a group. And this comes from evolutionary psychology, where and from prehistory, we needed to belong to groups to remain alive. So we have a need to belong because this gives us a security and that we can continue, that we can go on. The problem is when there is a distortion of the belonging to the group, and the identity becomes identitarianism. And here I'm using the word not to mean the right-wing political identitarianism in Europe, but also to mean any form of collective narcissism. And I will talk about that. So there are two problems here when identity is being pushed to the extreme, and also when we are conflating those two needs, the need for singularity and uniqueness with the need to belong to a group. According to Mark Gopin, who's actually a rabbi, He says, what often happens and what is central to the problem of religious militancy and violence, and I would argue, he says, many other forms of cultural and political totalitarianism, is the confusion of melding those two human needs. Instead of developing a psychological and moral self capable of dealing uh, uh, with these two needs, the need for integration and the need for uniqueness, and balancing them with the help of one's will, many people are tempted to do something much more violent. They create or submit to structures that give their own subgroup a strong sense of uniqueness, and then couple that with the need for integration with the world. So our group becomes the singular part. I'm not singular in myself, I'm not unique in myself, but my group becomes unique. And so the I becomes the we, and the we is the best. And we transfer the self-serving bias that is actually that we know from social psychology, where we give always positive attributes to ourselves, to a group-serving bias. So we end up giving positive attribute to our groups, and we affect social comparisons that are always to the benefit of our group and detrimental to others. So this is a natural mechanism that happens to all of us. But what happens is that if we are not aware, it grows and grows and grows, and we are not aware. And then the more insecurity we have, the more we do that. And we can be a minority being marginalized and developing such an attitude to give ourselves value so that our group is the best, because we feel that we are insecure, that we are endangered by the others. So we need to get that feeling that we are the best. Or we can be a majority afraid of losing its privileges, and we do the same. Okay, so identity being distorted to identitarianism in the sense of collective narcissism, and this could be religious, cultural, political, or on the level also of social class, saying that we are better than all of the others. This is doubly distorted when it turns into supremacy. And we can be in power or out of power and develop this feeling of supremacy, this idea that we are superior to others. This has fed our theologies. We have it in the chosenness theology. We find it subtly or less subtly in certain religions, but each religion has developed in a certain way that theology that we are the chosen people. In Islam, we also have a verse that says you are the best community that is brought forth for mankind. There is a condition for that, or there is a description why you are the best community. It's because you enjoin righteousness and you forbid evil and believe in God. But generally, in our self-serving or group-serving bias, we tend to say we forget that condition, and we just think that it is a label, it is a DNA, it's genetic, that we are better than others. And from those religious theologies, we know that it has reached certain political imperialism. So we idolize the self, the group, and put the others down. And a further distortion is that we create walls out of fear, but also out of disgust, as Sarah Ahmed also points out. So they can become a threat if they enter into our pure identity. So also Sarah Ahmed speaks as identities as bodies. So we don't want others to touch our bodies. So we create walls, whether those are physical walls, as we see in apartheid or in Trump's wall. But also we have all of those that happen, all of those walls that that we create that are more mental or theological, for example, Dalits in India, or racial segregation that we've witnessed, or we find it in some schools of Judaism and Islam, where the other from another religion or non-Orthodox is seen as impure. So we create those walls and put people outside. This describes mechanisms that we find in populist ideologies. But I want to argue that subtly we are all doing the same. We create walls. Today, I don't think anybody from populist ideologies is present in our conference. We create a wall to protect us from those others. To a certain extent, I'm saying, because we don't have all that mechanism, but we still do in a subtle way. Another need, I will be talking only about 3 needs. So a second need that we distort as human beings is the need of understanding. Of course, we all need to understand the world around us and how it functions. Yet, in social psychology also, there's a very important concept, which is the concept of cognitive dissonance. When 2 cognitive elements, be they thoughts, values, or data, contradict. What happens is when those 2 elements contradict, it is very difficult to accept that contradiction. Either try to live with the ambiguity of that contradiction, or try to allow a space for that contradiction to create something, a third thing. So what we do is generally shun one of those beliefs or one of those cognitive elements. So I keep one and I shun away the other. So this could be about my belief and the belief of another, because the belief of another could contradict my belief. So I close myself. I don't want to hear about the belief of another because it can be disturbing for me. Or when it's information that contradicts my views. And this is a constant challenge. And today, more than ever, we have it because we are faced with so much information, and we have the possibility to open up to such diverse perspectives. So it takes so much effort to accept this dissonance, and to accept that we don't have a grasp of everything, and that some issues remain ambiguous. Or sometimes to let go of an old belief and accept a new one because of the new data that we were faced with, or allow a fact or a piece of information question our beliefs or positions. So most people take the easy way, not dealing with the cognitive dissonance, and having one boxed position. And most of us do this. So that everything that does not fit in this boxed position that we have is thrown away. This breeds basically ideology in politics and dogmatism in religion. So I have my dogma, this is the only one, and anything else, anything different, any different interpretation from within my own religion, I refuse it because it could endanger or shake my beliefs. And the same way also in populism, we see this a lot. So they disregard things because they do not fit with their ideologies. And we are seeing this more and more, where actual data and facts are totally disregarded because they do not fit populist ideologies. And what happens is, of course, people stop hearing each other and become living in filtered bubbles and echo chambers where they only hear their own perspective, or people that are close to their own perspective. So this actually leads to also a distortion of the image of the other. As examples of this, so this as we live it both on the level of religion, but also on the level of ideology. So in religions also, this is not only in theology, but it is translated as laws. One of the most flagrant law for me is of course the idea of not allowing, for example, Christians to proselytize their religion in Muslim majority country. And in Morocco, there is even a law that says that criminalizes shaking the faith of a Muslim. So it's exactly that. It's shaking whatever they have. So if somebody is proclaiming a belief that is different from the belief of a Muslim, or for example, of Sunni Muslim, so if somebody is proclaiming Shiite beliefs, they could be put in jail for shaking the belief of a Muslim. And that is why in so many of the countries here, newer religions or newer sects that became a religion or sects within a religion are not accepted, like Ahmadiyya, Baha'is are completely refused. That is from the Muslims. Jehovah's Witnesses also are refused and not recognized and legally. So I remember when I used to teach multi-faith class, all religions to kids, I remember a child who was afraid to hear about another religion because he was afraid that this would contaminate. So again, here we are that disgust. We want to create sort of a body that is protected from that other that we fear or that we feel is less than us. Again, to shock you, I would like to say that sometimes we do the same. We cannot hear the others that have a different ideology than us. Our bodies flinch. Yesterday, I was seeing myself when I was listening to the presentation, or actually reading them in English. My body was flinching when I was listening to the discourse of the extreme right. So it's even the body revolts when we hear their arguments. Or the same happens to me also when I hear the exclusivist, the Muslim exclusivist, or Muslim extremists. So what happens is that it's so difficult actually to hear that we actually hear to label. I do not hear to see what is behind what he's saying. I hear to label. I hear to say that he is either illogical or that he is exclusivist or he is totalitarian or. So I dehumanize actually the other. Now, I give myself the legitimacy of doing that because he dehumanized me first. So I end up dehumanizing. And this is where I will move to the third need, which is a need for recognition. All of us have a need for recognition. All of us have a need that our culture, our group is recognized, but also we have a need that our suffering or the suffering that our group has encountered be recognized, and the fears also of our group be recognized. If when we feel our suffering or fear has not been recognized, we enter into a victimization mode. And when people feel victimized, they legitimize very harsh reactions. So as I was saying, I legitimize the fact that I strip the other of humanity because he stripped me first of humanity. In my context here, I live in a context where every group, mainly religious, but also sometimes ethnic groups, feels is a victim. And where also external powers are feeding this feeling of victimization. So, for example, in Muslim Shiism, victimization is already theological because the theology of Shiism is based on Imam Hussein, the granddaughter of the Prophet, having been martyred. So there is the martyrdom and victimization as being part, but also it's historical because they have been marginalized. Shias have been marginalized by Muslim majority, by Sunni majority for practically the whole of their history until recently. So even if today the Iranian regime or the Hezbollah, for example, are totalitarian, they still see themselves as victims, which allows them, legitimizes their positions and reactions. The Sunnis today, they feel that the saying that is said is the Shias are eating us. It's like they're taking over. So they feel that they are marginalized by Shia, plus to add the Islamophobia feeling. So they feel victims of Islamophobia and of Shia. And this is the thing that has been feeding extremists. A lot of extremists that came to our area to fight from abroad and from Europe, for example, they were, what led them was that feeling of we need to go help our brothers and sisters who are being victims. There were even discourses of Sunni women who are being raped, so we need to go defend them. And of course, they did the same themselves with especially the Yazidi girls. For Christians in the area, also the victimization can be also seen as theological because of that blessed if you are persecuted in my name understanding, and also sociological as a marginalized minority. And this is being fed by so many organizations in Europe. And of course, the right wing in Europe feeds on this and feeds it. So a lot of organizations or Christian organizations in the West that help our work, because as it was mentioned, I don't only work in university, but I work also in an NGO to work on inclusive citizenship that is inclusive of cultural and religious diversity. So a lot of Christian NGOs that fund our work are being attacked by right wing because they are not giving priority to Christians, but are giving funding to build social cohesion for all, which is on the long run would help Christians, but it is not seen like that because of the feeling of victimization that pits people against each other. So that there also always behind victimization, there is a fear that needs to be recognized. In nonviolent communication, the technique is to teach people to recognize emotion and to recognize the needs beneath those emotions. So here, beneath the emotion of victimization, beneath the fear, there is a need for security. And there is also a fear of losing an identity, and they need to be addressed. I'm talking here about, for example, the right wing. So when we talk about polarization, like in the title, it's two poles. So I want to argue now for theology, and I will move to the part of theology. We cannot be one pole. We need theologies that are encompassing. We need theologies that can go and read and understand what is happening there to encompass them in our reflection, and not to have a theology that is in front of, facing. Now, we have witnessed in the last century theologies that focus on the values that we hold dear, like liberation theology that highlights the values of justice, of equality, of solidarity, and that liberates us of classism also. Farid Ezak, a Muslim theologian of liberation, for example, reminds that one of the things that we always say in Islam is that we fast in Ramadan to feel with the poor. So he says, what is this? It's as if we're saying that this is a religion of the rich only. So they fast to feel with the poor. No, it's a religion for all. So fasting has another meaning. Because the poor is not feeling with the poor when they are fasting, and they fast more than the rich, actually. Theology of liberation recognizes suffering, recognizes oppression, marginalization, and paves the way to get out from such a situation. But it also, and it's very important, what it teaches us is it teaches us to uncover realities in order to direct the anger not to the other, but the source of oppression. So this is something that we can learn from in developing new theologies that would help us face that issue of a populist polarization. Feminist theology also, it is quite linked to liberation theology, or can be considered as part of it, is also, it also highlights justice and liberates our minds, women and men, from patriarchy and from viewing women as less value than others. So this also opens our eyes to see that how insidious it becomes part of our culture to see some people as having more value than others, and this can help us. And of course, there's a lot of work on feminist theology within Islam for the past decades. There is also nonviolent theology. That nonviolent theology, among which Jawdat Saeed, Syrian nonviolent theologian who passed away recently, or my friend Adnan Mokrani, who is writing about this, about non-coercion in nonviolent theology. So it is trying to strip religions from their hegemonic and imperialist attitude that actually have fed political imperialism. East and West, when I'm talking about political imperialism, I'm not only talking about colonizing West. I'm also think that all the empire that was built by Muslims is actually imperialism. Okay, we have pluralist theology, and this is something that I have worked on, that recognizes the plurality of religions and that unreads exclusivist interpretations. What is interesting in pluralist theology is that it reviews the question of truth and understand that truth is not dogma. So it allows us to also overcome the boundaries of dogmatism and ideology, because it is telling us that truth is something that we live. It is not something that is dogmatic, and that we live and that we practice daily. So we can also learn this from pluralist theology. Green theology also, that reduces our supremacy as human beings. There is also theology of fragility. I've worked a little bit on that too, that is inspired by persons with handicaps, and that allows us to recognize our limits as human beings, and that our limits are inherent to us, and that therefore we need to accept our fragility and not always try to be in control. I think that I cannot yet give examples of queer theology within Islam, but I think it is starting to be developed. And it allows us also to go beyond labeling and to question the norm not only to question the norm of what is the norm, but the most important question for me is to question the norm of who is the norm. Is it the white, blue-eyed person who is the norm, or is it the person who doesn't have disability, or is it the man who is the norm? And of course, or it is the heterosexual, of course. But and then it questions all of these norms that we have without noticing that we have these norms. So this also allows us to, I think, pave the way for theologies that could, I would not say anymore theologies against populist polarization, but that could allow us to build foundations for a different way of thinking. Why I don't say theologies against populist polarization, as I said before, because we don't want to be a pole. We need to encompass. We need theologies that can take into consideration the others. We need theologies that can take into consideration behind the totalitarian attitude and behind every fear and what it does to me when I hear their discourse. A theology that allows me to be mature enough to take into consideration the fears and the mechanisms that turned the people who carry those ideologies into people that have reduced or shrunk their empathy scope. Like in psychology, where we are asked to embrace our shadow side, I think we need to be able to embrace the shadow side of humanity. And this is the kind of theology that is asked of us today. An image very strong comes to me from Eastern Orthodox Christianity. It is that of Holy Saturday, Saturday of Light. It's called Saturday of Light in Eastern Orthodox theology, where with the concept of the harrowing of hell, in the sense of Jesus, that being of light, goes into hell and liberates people who are in hell. And I think this should be inspiring our theologies. In Islam, I think we have God is in dialogue with Satan, tries to understand what he wants, gives him time also to understand what he wants. These are some of the elements that I think we need to take into consideration to be able to think in a way where we are not polarized anymore, but where we are thinking for the common good and for the dignity of all, and not let the discourse of the others be in a place where we ourselves take on the counter values that we see in them. I will stop here to open the floor for discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tabbara, Nayla, Ms. Tabbara, for this inspiring talk and your paper. The floor is open for questions. Not yet. Yeah, I found your actually the aspects that you mentioned very interesting, coming from the more social or anthropological perspective, highlighting like the basic needs of humans in general, also the need of living in communities, and that in those communities usually you surround yourself with like-minded, there's this saying, birds of feather flock together. Mm-hmm. And they surround themselves, or they interact in certain communities, build the feeling of identity, and this comes often with a sense of building boundaries just to define the own identity better. And as we have seen yesterday, sometimes the own identity might not be defined as well with certain characteristics, but only by excluding the others. And this is, I think, a very a dangerous procedure, while the theology that you proposed should in fact include all differences, all as you see, free society from boundaries, from classes, etc., to have an identity that actually can manage this diversity. Yeah, I see we have our first question. Mr. Asmus, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for this inspiring talk. I'm very thankful for it. I wanted to add a thought that I learned, and it's applying to your view on the question of ambiguity and the ability to tolerate this whole subject. And there is a very interesting train of thought by the German religious scientist Thomas Bauer, and in his works he claims that ambiguity is also the basis of any religion, because the moment you accept that there is a transcendence, you accept that everything has several layers of reality, the thing you see and the thing you see through your religious beliefs and the like. So my question is there an element in religious life which we could strengthen in order to help people who are part of our religious communities, at least, to live without fear from ambiguity? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Shall I answer now?
No, please go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you for this question. From the Islamic tradition, what we have in Sufi tradition, in mystical Islamic tradition, the concept of perplexity. And it's as if in Sufism is it's describing that the path, we start with wanting answers, and then we start having answers, and we reach yaqeen, which is certainty, and then we realize that actually nothing is certain, because the more we start deconstructing images we have of God, the less certain we are. So in a way, certainty becomes something more of the heart, something in the heart of believers that are in taslim, and which gives the word Islam, which is a confident abandonment to God, to the divine. But the mind is now in perplexity. The mind is also, it's beyond also apophatism. So we have the apophatism in all of our in religions, especially Christianity and Islam. We have those theologies that focused on what God is not. God is not this, not this. So that's the apophatism. With the perplexity, it's beyond that, because it could be God is that and that and that, and there could be very contradicting. And even in Islam, God is the one, the bridger of contradictions, basically within Himself. So so perplexity is that allows us to accept that ambiguity, the fact that we can never grasp the essence of God. And that each time we do grasp something or feel something, the contrary might be true too.
Thank you very much for your paper and its suggestions of overcoming polarization, so to speak, in thinking. I just would love to hear more about what you have said on the one hand, about the basic needs we just have, and we can't do without: belonging and belonging to a group, understanding, being understood, and recognition. And on the other hand, to say, well, we can do without by means of theology. And I don't know how to bridge this gap, because those basic needs still are there, and we can't do without it, even if we do pluralist theology, liberation theology, and so on. And how can we avoid getting into the old shape in new forms of an imperialistic attitude, so to speak? So to say, just as an example, pluralist thinking now is the new norm. Mm-hmm. So we have a we, and we have that there, those are who are thinking in exclusivist forms. Pluralist thinking is a form of inclusivism, and inclusivism is thinking for others and not in front of others or with others. So I just wondered, you have said just now in replying to this question, the accepting ambiguity, and I wonder whether we have to sort of build in a sort of basic modesty in our thinking, not to be the ones who are really right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, because I think you've captured what I was trying to struggle with, basically. I actually don't have answers. It's just saying that we need to be thinking together on how to bridge this. And this is what theology should push us to, and not relive the same schemas that were lived before of imperialistic thinking and thinking in front of others. Just to say that in one of the reflections is that in my work on pluralist theology, the idea is to recognize, and I work on pluralism not in the sense of saying that all religions are equal and all paths are equal. When I work on Islamic pluralism, I say that according to Islam, Islam is the best religion. It is the best. So I'm recognizing the need in Islam to feel like the best, and to feel recognized, and to feel the singularity. But yet, other paths, other religions are also paths to God and to paradise. So it is. So it's sort of an encompassing way, yet while recognizing that need of singularity within that religion. I don't know if this is a way that takes into account the need for recognition, but I just want to share with you something. Most of my thinking came from an experience I had actually last year. Generally, when I give my lectures on theology of pluralist theology, I'm in an open setting. That was before Corona. So people tend to think a little bit before they attack or before they say something. Last year, I was giving a lecture on that for Sharia students, for Islamic studies, but legal studies students from the different countries in Arab world online, on Zoom. So Zoom, you have the chat, and the chat allows people to say whatever they want to say. And what I was realizing is that I had, as I was speaking, I had a lot of anger coming from the people that were attending. So Muslims that were refusing how I was daring to say that others are not kuffar, are not infidels, according to the Quran. How was I giving any value to others? Because it's as if our value comes from devaluating others. And the more I was making my point, the more I was quoting verses of the Quran, proving my point, the more violent they became. And the more I had people writing in the chat things about me. So they were using ad hominem arguments against me. So not only about my thought. So this is what made me think that using theology alone or using the values that we want alone without taking into consideration those needs that I was mentioning here cannot allow us to reach to reach something. Sorry, I'm taking a lot of time here. Something else from my experience with Anyan. We've been working with religious leaders and trying to integrate women, so women and men, religious leaders from different communities, on what we call religious social responsibility, promoting values of public life with religious leaders and within religious discourse, values of human dignity, of accepting diversity, of the common good, all of these. So they all take the courses and they're very happy, and they say that they're doing dialogue and they post this on their Facebook. But the moment we have something that threatens their identity, they just forget everything that they've learned and they react emotionally. And so this is something, for me, it proves that we need to also be able to integrate emotions and needs in whatever we are thinking to be able to do change. Thank you, and I'm sorry it was very long.
Yeah, thank you very much. Amina, please, and then Anya, Murat.
Okay, now, yes, thank you very much, Nayla, for your paper, and also thank you so much for accepting after 2 years after the first original request to attend this conference, even if it be online. And please do not apologize for taking your time, to answer. I think that you are making very valid and very interesting points, and some points which are really essential for our common considerations of how theologies can contribute to overcome these divisions, which, as we all very well know, can only too easily lead and result in violent actions. You have mentioned a few things to which the distortion of some basic human needs can lead, and one of them is or one of those processes is distorting the need for belonging, the need for integration into feelings of supremacy. And you have mentioned this in the context of, let's say, theologies of empire. I think this is one of those phrases that are often used. To me, it seems that many of these right-wing populist ideologies, movements, be they religious or non-religious, have this element in common, some sort of nostalgia for a lost empire. Those empire vary, so they can be, the Ottoman Empire, it can be the German Empire of the or whatever it's considered to be the German Empire, Kaiserreich. These can be different forms of empire, but somehow the nostalgia for times when we were strong seem to inform the historical narratives and historical images which are underlying the religious interpretations. And this is something that is also very important for my work, for me personally. I would like to know whether you have any suggestions. I know that you don't have answers. You never make that claim, but you have, I think, very interesting suggestions on how maybe try to overcome these mechanisms. Are there any traditions, or what do you think? Which kind of, let's say, theological positions or discourses could we mobilize, organize in order to face these the need for strength, which I think is very problematic. Thanks.
Thank you, Armina, and thank you again for being behind my invitation to be here among you. I can think in terms of Islamic theology and rethinking history. So, of course, everybody knows that in Islam we talk about the futuhat, the conquests, the Islamic conquests. And so that among the new theologians, there is this revisiting of history and saying that these conquests can be at best called Arab conquests, but we cannot call them Islamic because they are not within with the values of Islam. They were conquests done by people for that were driven maybe by a new religion, so a new ideology, but they were done for gain, for power, for control. And this is not Islam. And the word that is used for victory, futuhat, comes from a surah in the Quran, from a chapter in the Quran that is called the Surah Al-Fatih. Okay, the surah of victory. But actually, what it talks about is not a conquest in the sense that we know. What the Quran calls conquest or victory is actually a pact. It's Sulh al-Hudaybiyah. It's a pact between the Muslims and the polytheists. It's a pact of peace. So when we review the history of Islam, we see also that somehow, and I think this is the cause of the identity crisis that Islam has been going through since a century, somehow from the beginning of Islam, there has been a conflation also of being victorious religion, victorious in armies, and the authentic religion. And but we know that there was only one battle where they had the victory, the big victory with the angels fighting with them. But there were a lot of battles at the beginning of Islam where they were losing. So, but somehow there was this, and with all this theology of empire, we devised a theology where being in control, being powerful, being victorious means that we are the authentic religion and we are the right religion. And thus with the fall of the Ottoman Empire, there was this big loss that, so we are not the authentic religion if we lost in front of the infidel West. So it's also deconstructing that. I think this helps theologically. Socially, in our dealings with the people who live who long for the times of being strong and all of that, it's good to recognize that yes, it's beautiful. We wish we could be strong, but don't you think that when we were empire, we were also not very strong on human rights or not very strong on, and that how can we be strong again while taking into account the values that that we all agree on, even if we define them differently.
Thank you. Before moving to the next question, I just missed one in the chat that yeah, I apologize for that, we might discuss now. Ms. Gruber asks, could you name some of the social psychologist studies you refer to?
Okay, sure. Now there's the basic ones that like Tashfel and Moscovici that are talking about social identity. More new ones about cognitive dissonance. There's a book that is called Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me. I forgot the name of the author. And I also quoted specifically Sarah Ahmad, The Cultural Politics of Emotion. So I think these are the ones I was referring to the most.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for your very enriching contribution. And my question is also, what kind of theology do we really need, or can we really generate or produce in order to encounter or not in regarding populism. And in order to exit theologically from mechanisms of polarization, you've recommended some liberal theological approaches that have taken shape in the recent decades, like a theology of liberation, feminist theology, and others you mentioned. And many of these approaches know a decisive theological positioning for the marginalized. And on the other hand, you have said that it is necessary to break through ideologies by choosing a theology that also takes into account the fears of those who pursue ideologies and populisms. So my question is, as you also have stressed, that it is necessary to embrace the shadows, as you said, how does this really fit together? So how can this work? You know,
I really don't know.
Yeah, but perhaps you just could give me an idea in what direction it might go.
I mean, I will maybe be repeating what I said because I really don't know. This is where I got just 2 minutes before the presentation started, so I don't have enough also distance to my reflection. But I think that definitely what I'm saying is what we can learn from liberation theology, from feminist theology, is to unread things and to read also these very subtle mechanisms or the very subtle exclusivism that happens or injustice that have been happening and that we weren't aware of. So maybe we can use that to also to uncover in a certain way those mechanisms that I was referring to from social psychology. But I really don't know if this is applicable or if this actually makes sense. It's just the thing that we cannot get out of where we are stuck as humanity today if we keep on being in polarization. And it's true that in liberation theology and in feminism, we can tend to be also polarized. So this is not what I'm mentioning. On the contrary, I'm saying that always we need to be thinking in a way where we take in and work together. At the end, the oppressor suffers also, not only the oppressed. So to grab that, to go there, to see where the oppressor suffers and help them and work with them and not in front of them. This is what I'm saying. We need to be the bigger persons. We need to, but I believe that we cannot get out of that polarization without thinking like that. And maybe I want to tell you where also this comes from practically, but this would be, I will also describe a little bit for you Lebanon. I mentioned briefly a little bit, but you know that we are very polarized in Lebanon since also, not only it appeared with the revolution of 17 October, but this has been from before. We are polarized between, from one hand, like the Hezbollah, and like the pro-Syrian regime from the one hand, and on the and also that there is also all the corrupt, of course, oligarchy there, and the people who are fighting for freedoms, for rights, and all of that. And what it was at the beginning of the revolution, the people who were fighting for freedom and for rights were doing what I'm trying to say that let's do, because when they would get people from the Hezbollah or parties from that camp who would come and beat them up, they would tell them, come, you are our brothers, you are victims like us, we will not succumb to this, we will not get polarized. With time, they couldn't, and people got polarized. And this also happened this last October, when actually the other side that was always peaceful and always actually took up arms. It was one political party that took up arms also, so we had that polarization. And that day I understood that we are reliving the civil war that we had lived in Lebanon from 1975 to 19. We don't hear each other. When the other talks, the labels are all directly in my head: traitor, imperialist, totalitarian. It's those. We don't hear each other. We cannot. And so I said to myself, I want to try and hear the news of the Hezbollah. And behind all of the totalitarianism and everything, I could hear that they are seeing that we presented so much sacrifices for this country, fighting against Israel and pushing off Daesh in Syria and all of that. And you're not seeing that. You're only seeing us as the ones who want to control. And so it is. I'm saying that it is possible, but it takes a lot. It takes a lot of effort. But I think this is the only thing that will allow us to reach a higher level of, or a deeper level of humanity.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you for your thoughts you shared with us about the subjects we are discussing since yesterday. Of course, please forgive my mistakes I'm going to make during asking my question, because I'm not very fluent in English. As you described the different needs, the duality of human needs, on one hand, the need of singularity, being an individual, expressing yourself as an individual, and also on the other hand, being part of a group, the urge or the need of collectivity. I came to the thought that, or I thought about the Islamic belief and his ritual manifestations of this belief, mirroring these human needs, as in all the ritual aspects of Islamic belief, as in the prayers or zakat or fasting or even Hajj. You have these approach to the different needs of human beings, the approach to an individual spirituality, but also the need to being part of a collective, as a group, which you are sharing these moments of belief and rituals. And I would like to ask you, from your point of view, which one of these elements of belief, the individual aspects or the collective aspects, are in danger or more in danger to trigger the path to thoughts of superiority of the own group in comparison to the inferiority of others, or supremacy as general, or asking with, in the words of Max Frisch, is it easier for us to hate another group or to hate another individual, a specific person? And is it easier for us to hate as an individual, to hate others as an individual, or as a part of a collective, as a group? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this question. So this reminds me also of the approach to emotion, and also Sarah Ahmad that I've mentioned. She talks about this, that psychology tells us that emotions are from within and they go out. And sociology tells us that also emotions can come from out to within. So we see this in group reactions or mass reactions. For example, whenever there's a caricature on the Prophet. So you see that it is not my anger or your anger, but it's the anger of the community that is getting everybody angry. So themselves, they're not angry, but it is that feeling of the ummah that is angry that is bringing people to the streets and to be angry. So, so definitely, I would think that group emotions are definitely stronger than personal emotions. They galvanize people and they move people. And this is why I think that when we are, when we are talking thoughts and values, we cannot reach galvanize people. It is those group emotions of saving the identity and protecting the identity that are waves, and those waves are very strong. And my main problem, beyond the idea of ummah, of course, and everything that we've talked about, my main problem is that when this identity becomes so shaken that anything shakes it, and I want to give you an example that I always give, that shook me a lot, is in Pakistan. There was the governor of Punjab who was trying to defend not only Asya Bibi, but trying to say that we need to get rid of the blasphemy law. Because he wanted to get rid of the blasphemy law, the religious leaders started saying that he is being anti-Muslim, because blasphemy law is protecting Islam from being ridiculed or something. And this led his bodyguard to kill him. But the problem is that the bodyguard, of course, the government captured the bodyguard, and he received capital punishment. But the funeral of the bodyguard is said to have been one of the biggest funerals in Pakistan ever. So it is, and he has been turned into a hero. And today there are shrines in the name of that guy, Qadir, because he was considered a hero for defending Islam, because he killed a man. And he killed a man just who wanted to abolish blasphemy law. So yes, these group emotions are very scary, I think, and unless we know how to take them into considerations, I mean, it's a tsunami. It's a big wave. So I don't know if I answered your question, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Amir?
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me good.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, it's a very interesting discussion. I have one question. If you can remind us of your observation about the general role of religion in the construction of national identity in Muslim countries from the midst of the 20th century. So, yeah, because I think it's very important to ask also the question, what kind of role does religion play in the idea of national building and building national identity in contemporary Muslim countries? And referred a little bit to that distinction between religious certitude and social and political certitude, and that they are sometimes very intertwined by Islamic narratives like Fath and the Quran and Futuh, for example, as a historical concept. What are your observations regarding this question?
Sorry, can you repeat the second question?
So what are your observations regarding this relation between religion and the building of national identity in contemporary Muslim countries?
Okay. So if you look at the, I would speak more about Arab countries. I am more familiar with Arab countries than other Muslim majority countries. But I mean, when you look at Arab countries today, all Arab countries except 4 clearly say that the identity of that country is Muslim. So Islam is fundamental to the identity. Other countries are more say that they don't say that it's the identity, but say that it is the source of laws, or that it inspires laws. And Lebanon being an exception in this in this domain. So definitely that has been the case. Yet what we've seen with the Arab Spring is the opening up of many Muslim majority countries and accepting diversity within and discovering diversity within. So for example, we see that a lot in Tunisia, where, for example, people used to be told that Tunisia is 99% Sunni Muslims, and then they discovered that no, there are a lot of other groups, whether Islamic or non-Islamic, in Tunisia, and that I mean, this idea of homogeneity is just also an ideological cover. A lot of constitutions, or a number of constitutions, have more and more included a diversity in the constitution. We've seen that also, for example, in Morocco. We've seen that in Algeria, whether it is religious or also ethnic diversity. So bringing in Amazigh, talking about diversity. Others are, we have, for example, as in Iraq, we have a contradiction in the first articles of the constitution between saying that Islam is the source of laws or saying that human rights are the source of laws. So this gives an example of sort of where we are in many countries, opening up to diversity, accepting it, yet especially where we have monarchies, it is a very big question mark, because the monarchy is related also to Islam. And so how do you articulate the monarchy being Islamic with an Islamic culture of the country, but also with accepting diversity and recognizing diversity? It is also a bit of a protectionist. We feel that it's still a protectionist. The monarchy and the Muslims are protecting the non-Muslims. So it's that we see that there are changes happening, but there is a need to work on the constitutions and on the laws themselves concerning diversity, and mainly, I think, first on apostasy laws and blasphemy laws. These are the most important, I think, to be working on, and that are in blatant contradiction with human rights and freedom of religion or belief. But this is very big work. So in Adyan, in our foundation, the concept that we've developed is the concept of something that we call inclusive citizenship. So it is citizenship that is inclusive of diversity of religious and cultural and ethnic diversity. So it is not a pure secularism, as in refusal of religions, because in our part of the world, people really are afraid of the word secular. For them, secular means atheist, and so it's like, no. So we talk about inclusive citizenship. This is accepting diversity, but finding mechanisms together to deal with this diversity, and to deal positively with it, not hide it or not say that, oh, all is wonderful, all is well, but in actuality having everything resemble the majority and the minority feeling that they are culturally marginalized. So how to de-marginalize all the different groups, culturally, politically, and all of that, yet at the same time, that poses the question of what do we do with the religious identity of those countries. So it's a fundamental question that I think all Muslim majority countries that have that in their constitution will need to ask themselves. For example, for me, there's always we give the example. I'm moving outside Arab countries, but to, for example, Indonesia, where people talk about the Pancasila, the five main points on which they've built their citizenship. But one of them is belief in God. So for me, this is not a positive point, because you have other religions that and non-believers. It cannot be something that is part of also the identity. So it is something that needs to be rethought.
I'm coming to this, what we discussed before, what you mentioned is, my question is also relating to our debates yesterday, in which sense this concept of nationalism, this fantasy of areas of ethnic homogeneous bodies. We had it in Germany with the empire, the Kaiserreich, which tried to build together a Germany which didn't exist before that. We had it in France with the minorities in the fringes outside of Paris being streamlined to a French identity and so forth. And I think that one of the questions we have to ask our theological traditions is, in which way our religious practices or our theological concepts had aligned themselves with the idea of nationalism. There was always an idea of the religion supporting the ethnic communities or the people around, but not necessarily linked to national identity. We have the German churches that are, the Protestant churches are still splintered in regional churches according to very, very old kingdoms and everything. But they also embraced national identity in their periods and still have the problem to think outside these identities, while all the major religions in their approach don't have any concept of nation.
Yeah.
It's the Yuma, the Christendom, everything is linked by faith, not by ethnic or national identity. So I think we have to evaluate our theologies in that sense. Where are we linked to this frightening concept? Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a double-edged sword also, because in Islam, actually what we try to do with extremist Muslims is actually tell them to believe in nations, in countries, because believing in the Ummah alone and not believing in the laws of the countries they live in is also very problematic. So at least for us in our organization, what we try to do is to include in religious education the concept of citizenship. And it is the concept of being a citizen that works for the good of all, wherever you are. So today also in education, there is this notion of global citizenship. And I think this is what we could also reintegrate in religious discourse. How to be basically, how our religions should lead us to be global citizens, in the sense of to be active citizens, to be inclusive citizens, to work for the common good wherever we are. without that feeling that I'm related to this nationality because of my DNA or and because we are at an area of like post nation states. Yet at the same time, the idea that we do have these constructs that are our different countries that have something historically together, that have something culturally together. We cannot overthrow it completely. And I think this is also what right wing is afraid of. This whole difference happening not only from refugees, but it's in the air du temps. It's our time where we are at that phase where we really need to rethink what it means, what our countries mean. And also more work for more constitutional patriotism than Habermasian terms than that. So on both levels.